Are you using the right mythic for your build? With so many options, it's easy to pick the wrong one, or worse, waste your time chasing leads on something that doesn't even fit your playstyle. Instead of just giving you my list, I asked the community on what mythics see real play in PvP. Today, we'll break down each of them, what they do best, the pros and cons. So, now sit back, relax, and let's dive in. Hello everyone, Sayphex here. We're starting with by far the most popular mythic, Dead Dealer's Fete. This item has a stacking mechanic, meaning that each few seconds that you're in combat, you get more health, more stamina, and magicka. And at the end, you'll get about 2,640 more of each stat, which is quite a lot. This item can be used in almost all of the builds as the combat in PvP lasts forever. For example, if you're sieging, fighting prolonged fights in BGs or IC, you can expect for this item to shine the most. The best part about it is that it has basically no downsides. It is very useful for PvP healers, tanks, and for basically any class, especially wardens who love to stack HP. With all of its amazing pluses, it has a teeny tiny minus. For example, there are some situations in IC where you can fight NPCs and you can get out of combat pretty quickly. And maybe in BGs, you can also get out of combat pretty quickly, so you're not fully stacked when you come into a fight. So try to take your fight slow, trying to stack up before you jump into the fight. Next up is Gaze of Sithis. This unique mythic gives you a lot of defensive stats. It gives you 4k armor, 3k health, and a lot of recovery that it's even starting to be noticeable in PvP. For those who do not know, healing, shield power, and healing health recovery are all halved in PvP. This item sees the most use in non-CP environments, for especially no CP Cyrodiil, where most proc sets are banned and players usually use stat-based sets, for example this one. You can argue that this set can be used by Nightblades as a defensive set, but there's a more hidden problem with this mythic that comes in. Besides the obvious minus of block being useless on it, because it gives you no additional mitigation, making you very vulnerable to kills like Meteor or any other hard-hitting skills, the other minus, a more hidden one, is that it uses the same spot as Monster Helmet, making it very hard to be put in any build, as Monster Helms are a core part of many setups. For example, healers love using Earthcore, Wardens, Templars, Nightblades love using Baloric, and the list goes on. Overall, this item does provide good stats, but the value it brings, it's not enough to be considered and used in many builds. Next up is Lefthander's Aegis belt. Now this item I initially overlooked, and after a bit of consideration and help from a lovely community, it could prove to be one of the best defensive mythics available. In general, this mythic gives you a huge shield when you roll dodge, making you very tanky. Generally, when you do not have this item, a normal roll dodge can evade many attacks except AoE, but with this mythic it's a bit different. You get a shield instead of the ability to evade attacks. This means that with one roll dodge you can almost double your HP with just 1 second, making it very handy. The other amazing benefit is that you can now avoid AoE attacks, as shields will most likely be strong enough to absorb all of the damage that you would otherwise not be able to evade. The best way to utilize it is to make sure that you have some well-fitted traits on your gear, as well as wear medium armor, because it will reduce the cost of roll dodge significantly, making your shield much more frequent. Also, I think that Bastion's CP perk could boost the effectiveness of the shield of this mythic. But be aware that if you roll dodge too much, you can run out of stamina very quickly, so I would use this as a caution when using this item. Malacath is next, once the strongest mythic, now still a solid pick for anyone with dot damage. In a nutshell, this item increases your overall damage, but it reduces your crit damage. meaning that it's best used with dot damage and high pressure builds. For example, it won't be good on Nightblades, Wardens, and Necromancers, whose builds usually use a lot of crit damage trying to burst your opponent. It will be, however, very good on classes like DKs and Arcanists, who love to use as much dots as possible. The next mythic is Markyn's Ring of Majesty. This item is basically a stat-based mythic, giving you plenty of weapon or spell damage and armor, making it a very well-rounded item. In a nutshell, this item gives you stats based on how many free pieces of a set you have active. In general, most players will try to get at least 2 pieces active at the same time, giving you overall about 200 weapon or spell damage and 2314 armor. However, you could theoretically get 3 sets of a free piece, but you will have to wear a 3-piece set, for example, agility, ancient grace, willpower, or any other 3-piece set on your bar. This, however, will come at a great cost for not being able to wear a monster helmet. So here the calculation comes in, and I would recommend that you have 3 pieces active of 2 sets, so you'll get this 200 weapon damage and about 2k armor. This item in general is great on Nightblades, Sorcs, and Templars, or any other class, as it's a very well-rounded item. Oakensoul is a very unique mythic that simplifies your combat. In a nutshell, it only allows you to use one bar, making your combos much easier. It's amazing for brand new players who are trying to learn the basic mechanics of ESO. With it, you don't need to spend the time buffing up or swapping your bars for that reason. However, with its clear benefit of ease of play, it does have its downsides. For example, the most advanced gear setup is back to front bar setup. This means that you have one piece of 5 sets and the back bar, usually a utility or a defensive set, and one 5-piece on the front bar, for example, an offensive set, and also a monster helmet and a mythic and one piece of trainee. This allows you for the greatest optimization of the gear that you have. And with this item, this is simply not possible. So in a nutshell, with Oakensoul, you will have much simpler combat, making it very good for a brand new player, but at the cost of your gear optimization. The Ring of the Wild Hunt is next, a very underrated mythic in my opinion. This item gives you a lot of movement speed in and out of combat. In general, movement speed in PvP is very important, as with it you can avoid AoE attacks, you can go in and out line of sight much faster, and you can get out of range of other melee attacks if you play in such a way. This ring is great for everyone who has all of the areas in your build covered. For example, if you already are tanky enough, if you can already deal enough damage, and if recovery is not an issue, then this ring would be a perfect addition to already a great build. But if you don't have that, then maybe other mythics could be much more beneficial for you, covering the area that you're lacking, or the area you would like to elevate, being more tanky, even more sustain, or even more damage. I would say Ring of the Wild Hunt is like a cherry on top to already a great build. Sea-Serpent's Coil is a very strong item. It gives one of the core and most powerful buffs in the game, Major Courage and Major Brutality. Together, it gives you an insane amount of damage that can hardly be compared to any other mythic or even sets in some cases. But with such power comes a great cost. You will have a permanent 40% slow on you, making you a sitting duck and prone to be very immobile and basically impossible to escape combat in a fight. In most classes, you will have to adapt the whole build in order to mitigate such an effect. For example, you could wear free swift traits on your jewelry for 25% more movement speed. You could also use Clarity CP for another 10% movement speed, in total for 31%. And even with this optimization, you're still 10% slower than a normal player without any of such perks. Overall, this mythic is a very powerful one, but does it have its downsides? So you should be aware of the costs. Next up is Snow Treaders. These are medium boots that give you an immunity to snares and immobilizations at the cost of not being able to sprint. Usually this item is not worth for a solo player, but it's an amazing and essential item for any group composition, simply because it allows you to ignore most of the crowd control and you can move freely and uninterrupted throughout the combat. Basically, the only CC you have to worry about are stunts, which are in many cases predictable and you can easily break free. Usually this item will save you a lot of stamina for more important maneuvers such as breaking free and roll dodging, or if you're using a lot of stamina skills, of course it will help you with sustain. Overall, this is a very solid mythic for an organized group in PvP. Next up is a mythic called Saint and the Seducer. This is a very powerful item that can be considered one of the strongest ones without any bad trade-offs. It gives you a rotating major buff and a minor debuff for the enemy. Together, it gives you a huge bonus, but at the cost of being randomized. Compared to a Sea-Serpent's Coil that provides a constant buff at the cost of speed, this one, the Saint and Seducer, will give you the same buff but at no such cost. A big pros in this item it is that it will give you a huge and very useful buff, but it will be random, so you will have to adjust your play accordingly. Usually this item is paired with Daedric Trickery set that gives you a similar thing, which is very strong on DKs and many other classes. Next up is Torc of Tonal Consistency. This is, in my opinion, one of the best recovery mythics. It's amazing on almost every class. It allows you to take care of your sustain with almost just this item alone. In general, you will need to have a lot less sustain optimization when you use this mythic. Basically, the only thing you'll have to keep in mind is that you'll have to use a hybrid build using both stamina and magicka for the maximum optimization. Knowing which mythic to use is only one part of the equation. The other is how you use it. Even the best mythics won't carry you if you don't optimize the rest of your build. That's why I put together a video on tips that only great players know. And if you want to take your PvP to the next level, then click here and check it out. Have a great day and goodbye.